Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. Welcome, Mr. Secretary. I will ask about Iran, Cuba, Venezuela, and the Palestinians. You testified in the Senate yesterday that, quote, the policy is Iran will not get a nuclear weapon, end quote. However, last month, your deputy, Tony Blinken, testified deal being negotiated is meant only to constrain Iran's breakout capabilities. So which one is it, constraining or eliminating? And if the deal is to truly prevent Iran from ever acquiring a nuclear weapon, then why are we allowing Iran to enrich, to keep some of their stockpiles and centrifuges? Your agreement is based on the assumption that we can verify if Iran cheats, but the Defense Science Board and former CIA Director General Hayden have stated that our capability to detect Iran's undeclared or covert nuclear sites is either inadequate or does not exist. So can we catch when Iran cheats? And when they do cheat, not if, but when, what consequences will Iran suffer? And reports surfaced yesterday, as the chairman said, of an undeclared Iranian enrichment site. What information can you share about this new site? And will this development how will this development impact the negotiations? On Cuba, Mr. Secretary, yesterday in the Senate, you said, quote, the change that we are making, we believe, actually assists the United States to be able to promote the democracy and the rights that we want for the people of Cuba, end quote. However, Cuba's spy, Josefina Vidal, who is leading the Castro delegation this week, said that Havana will not accept a U.S. embassy that will assist Cuba's civil society, and said that, quote, change in Cuba isn't negotiable, end quote. Now, the regime has arrested over 300 opposition members in just the last 2 weeks. Berta Soler was among them. Only 3 weeks ago, Mr. Secretary, she was sitting in your chair testifying before our committee on the gross human rights abuses going on in Cuba today. She returned to Cuba on a Saturday. She was arrested Sunday. Yet, U.S. Castro talks are still scheduled to go on here at the State Department on Friday. But the U.S. didn't even get one cosmetic commitment to democratic reform from the Castro regime, and the regime keeps demanding more from us. Give back Gitmo. Pay us billions of dollars from the losses we suffered from the embargo. Utterly ridiculous. And just yesterday, Mr. Secretary, Raul Castro bestowed medals on those whom your administration pardoned, including Gerardo Hernandez, who was responsible for killing U.S. citizens. On the very anniversary of the killing of our citizens, Castro gave a medal to his killer, a killer who was pardoned by this administration. Of all the bad deals that we've seen, Bergdahl, et cetera, isn't this Cuba deal the weakest one yet? And on Venezuela, Mr. Secretary, yesterday, just a few days ago, a 14-year-old child was killed by police thugs. Actually, just yesterday, 14 years old. He was shot in the head during a peaceful protest. Now, we in Congress passed the sanctions law to punish such acts, but you have not fully implemented our law. States' decision to deny some visas to some people is only a small slap on the wrist. People are dying in Venezuela, and we're hearing are excuses. Enough is enough. Why have you not fully implemented every one of the sanctions laws that we passed against human rights violators in Venezuela? How many more peaceful demonstrators must die before you sanction them? And lastly, on the Palestinians, our courts just a few days ago, as you know, ordered the Palestinian Authority and the PLO to pay for terror. And yet the PA has hired a D.C. lobbying firm. We all know that money. So isn't our money to the Palestinians actually paying for their court-ordered terror penalties and their lobbying efforts here in Congress?
Well, let me answer the last two very quickly, and then I'll talk about the others. The answer is no. That money is not paying for it. In fact, that money is not flowing right now because of the ICC and what is going on. And the PA is nearly bankrupt at this moment. It is in nobody's interest, Madam Chair, for this to for the PA to fall apart. That is not.
And on Cuba?
So we don't want that to happen. I'll come to Cuba in a minute. On the 14-year-old Venezuelan, that is horrendous. Venezuela keeps moving in the wrong direction and making the wrong choices. And the answer is the sanctions are being implemented right now as fast as possible. We are working with the National Security Council. We're working with the Department of the Treasury and other agencies to implement the provisions of the law as rapidly as we can. So we have no disagreement whatsoever on the egregious behavior, the repression of people, the arrests, the false accusations against us that are emanating out of Venezuela. We invite frequently President Maduro to realize that there's a completely alternative set of options available to him. We hope he'll take them.
But he can commit these acts with impunity because nothing happens. We really aren't implementing
the law
those
is
sanctions.
being implemented. It is being implemented. Sanctions, you know, everybody thinks you just sort of slap them on day one. There's a very specific set of requirements in the law for what you have to do to prepare in order to...
But the killer of this 14-year-old, wouldn't he? We know who did it. Why don't we just why didn't we sanction them yesterday? We have the video.
Yeah.
We're going to have to keep. I'm just going to suggest.
Let me just say the sanctions are being applied.
Yes.
In Cuba, don't measure it by where it is today. Measure it by what begins to happen as this process of normalization takes place, and we have an opportunity to be able to press those issues and shed more light on them and create the change we hope will take place. And I could go on at some length about that, but I want to get to the other things you mentioned very quickly. On Iran, there is no equivalency between, you know, what Secretary Blinken was talking about with respect to preventing them from getting a weapon and the question of what happens with respect to their compliance with respect to their nuclear program. If you have a year of breakout time, by the way, everybody, I think it's a publicly known number that has been bandied around in the press that prior to our joint agreement, the breakout time was about 2 months, maybe 3 max, but somewhere around 2 months. We've already extended that. And our effort in this agreement is to get a period of time, I'm not going to say how long, but a period of time during which they've got to live by a 1-year breakout. Now, 1-year breakout does not mean time it takes to get a bomb. 1-year breakout is time it takes to get enough fissile material for one nuclear weapon, which they haven't yet designed or been able to test or put on a warhead or explode or anything. So that's many more years it takes to get there. We don't lose one option that we have today, not one option, during that period of time. Slap back on the sanctions, make them worse than they are today. Or, of course, if you had to, you always have a option. So we don't take away any option. We actually expand the period of time during which we can determine what's going on. Now, I'll tell you, Israel is safer today with the added time we have given and the stoppage of the advances in the Iranian nuclear program than they were before we got that agreement, which, by the way, the Prime Minister opposed. He was wrong. And today he's saying, oh, we should extend that interim agreement.
Will you share the agreement with Netanyahu?
Of course, of course. We've continued. I think even today our department is on the phone to the National Security Advisor, and we're having calls.
Mr. Secretary,